Hello, good evening, and welcome to Unacademy IAS, a one stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. This is Shyam Good here, taking up the Hindu news analysis for 30th January 2026. Now, before I start the session, please do let me know that I'm audible and visible for all of you. Those present in the session, can you please confirm? Am I audible and visible? Done. Thanks a lot. So let's start. In today's session, I've taken a total of 10 articles. These particular 10 articles, most of them are from the economic survey, which have been published in the Hindu newspaper. But in addition to that, I've also taken some articles from international relations, polity, right, ecology and environment, etc. The discussion will be comprehensive, which will help you answer the questions in the prelims as well as mains examination. If you're liking this initiative, do not forget to hit the like button. And if you're yet to join our YouTube channel, kindly do it right now. Now, let me start. But before that, a very important announcement. I know a lot of you are preparing for the Civil Services Examination 2027. And trust me, this is the right time to start your preparation. Now, whenever you prepare, you need to have a comprehensive program which will cater to all the requirements, which will help you address the questions in the prelims, mains, and help you clear the examination in the first attempt. For that, you need a comprehensive coverage of the static portion, correct approach towards the current affairs coverage, correct reading material, prelims as well as mains test series. You will get access to all of this once you enroll into our courses. And our courses right now are available at a lowest ever prices, 17,999. Those interested in enrolling, go to the description box of the video, click on the link provided there, check out the prices in the website. Whatever is the price mentioned, use the code IAS English and the prices will be discounted. Now let me start the discussion. First important article, health expenditure by the central government. The union budget is around the corner now. Day after tomorrow, the government is going to come out with the union budget. So this Sunday, there is no respite. You are supposed to study the union budget if you are writing the civil services examination, which is going to happen this year. Now, when there is a lot of discussion, these important areas, for example, investment in healthcare, investment in, let's say, infrastructure, the devolution to the states, etc., a lot of them will appear in the newspaper. So today, there is very big article in the text and context page which discusses what has happened to the healthcare expenditure. Mind you, this is more to do with the expenditure in the healthcare, not to do with the schemes under the healthcare. Now, what are the important points? The government of India every now and then announces a national health policy. I'll start using the short form now, NHP, National Health Policy. For example, back in the year 1983, there was a health policy announced. Back in the year 2002, a health policy was announced. And in the year 2017, the government of India announced a healthcare policy. According to that healthcare policy, which is applicable right now, the government of India stated that there is a need to increase the expenditure by the central government within the healthcare sector. How much? From a number which was 1.15 percentage of GDP, now the expenditure to be increased by 2025, the target that was set up by the government was 2.5 percentage of GDP. And it should not be surprising to you to know that we have not been able to meet the target. And we have not been able to meet the target. That is point number one. Point number two, the government within this particular policy also had one more target. And that was essentially to ensure that 40% of the total expenditure, public expenditure on the healthcare, will be borne by the central government. Its target was 40% of the total public expenditure. What do I mean by that? Healthcare mainly is provided by the state governments. Remember this, healthcare is mainly provided by the state governments. State governments implement lot of infrastructure, implement schemes, and most of the expenditure on healthcare is incurred by the states. So out of the total public expenditure, center plus state, 40% of the expenditure, that was the target set up by the central government. Again, we have not been able to meet this particular target as well. So first one, 2.5 percentage of GDP. Did we meet the target? No. 40% was the target out of the total public expenditure. Did we meet that target? No. Second important point. Third important point, when you compare India with other countries, you can use multiple parameters. For example, one of the ways to compare the countries is just by looking at GDP numbers. Very often you'll come across this in the newspaper. India is the fourth largest economy. China is the second largest economy. USA is the largest economy, etc. But please understand, rather than comparing countries looking at the absolute numbers like this, it is always better, qualitatively better, to compare the countries looking at per capita. Everybody is okay with the statement here? Per capita. Per capita essentially means per person. Why, sir? Why per capita is always better? When you look at two countries, let's imagine there are two countries A and B. You will simply look at two countries and say, country has spent, A has spent $5 billion in healthcare on the people, and country B has spent, let's say, $1 billion to provide healthcare for the people. If I were to ask you, which of the two countries is better? You look at the absolute number and simply close your eyes and say, sir, this is very easy. A. First country is better. But what if I say, in the country A, the population was 100 crore people, and in the second country, the population is 1 crore people. Now, looking at the per capita, you will realize second country's expenditure on healthcare is much better. Everybody is able to understand the logic behind this. So whenever you compare two countries, rather than looking at the absolute numbers, look at per capita. Right? So per capita will give you better information. So when you look at the BRICS economies, how much is the expenditure incurred by government of India in terms of per capita? It is much lower. Much lower compared to other countries within the BRICS economies. And within the Asian market itself, India does not perform better compared to its neighboring countries when you look at the per capita expenditure on the healthcare. This is the third very important point. Everybody is okay. Everybody is on the same page with me regarding the discussion. Now let's go to the fourth point. During pandemic, what has happened to the healthcare expenditure in the last, let's say, 6 to 7 years? During the pandemic, it was seen that the expenditure of the central government increased. The expenditure of the state governments also increased. But this was only during the pandemic. After the pandemic, it seems the central government's expenditure has been controlled. And when I say controlled as a percentage, it has been controlled, but the state's government's expenditure has increased. The states have continued to spend more in providing the healthcare to the people, but the central government's expenditure has been scaled back, and this is a cause of concern. This is a cause of concern for a simple reason. Like I said, central government initially had set certain targets. Second, we have not been able to meet the targets. And at the same point of time, the requirement of healthcare for the people in India with increasing population also has increased. According to multiple studies, it has been shown that a huge chunk of the expenditure in healthcare, it is out of the pocket expenditure. Out of the pocket expenditure in case of Indian households. That is because the insurance coverage is very less. Healthcare costs have increased, have inflated in the recent times by a large margin. Whenever I spend money on healthcare, because insurance protection is lesser, I will have to spend a lot of money from my pocket. And this will hurt the productivity of labor, especially in lower income households. Because in those particular households, first and foremost, the population per household is higher. And generally, there is 1 or 2 people who are working and feeding remaining 6 to 7 people. Now, if their, right, let's say health is affected, if they fall ill and out of pocket expenditure is very high in India, essentially this will hurt their productivity, and not to forget, it will further push them into poverty. Done. This is the fourth point. Next, as per the data that has been published by Reserve Bank of India, As per data that has been published by RBI, allocations for health and family welfare by all the states and union territories have increased. Right? The data is given here. Download the PPT, use the PPT. Next important point. What has happened to the government's allocation in the schemes? Because there are multiple schemes. Generally, you will classify the schemes into sector, central sector, and centrally sponsored. Correct? Central sector and centrally sponsored. And what is essentially the difference between both of them? Central sector, 100% of expenditure is borne by the union government. Centrally sponsored, the expenditure is shared between the government of India as well as the state governments. What has happened to the allocation of the central government within these centrally sponsored schemes? According to the data provided here, in 2014 and 2015, 3/4 of the total expenditure that was done by the union government on healthcare was essentially the money that was transferred to the states. For what purpose? For the implementation of centrally sponsored schemes. For the implementation of centrally sponsored schemes. Now, over a period of time, this particular allocation out of the total healthcare expenditure money that was done by the government, it has reduced to 43%. It has reduced to 43%, which essentially means what? The burden on taking care of the expenditure for the implementation of these particular schemes is more on the state governments now. Right, so these are certain very important points which basically prove one point. During the pandemic, the focus on healthcare increased. But after the pandemic, the focus on healthcare by the central government, by the union government, as a percentage of allocation of the funds, as a percentage of the GDP, etc., that particular focus has loosened or has come down. And the article basically says it is the right time to change the, right, let's say, change the path now. The budget is going to come. The government needs to focus again on healthcare. Done? Everybody is okay? Please do let me know. Now, based on the discussion that I've done, please take up this particular question for mains answer writing practice. COVID-19 highlighted the importance of public health systems. Yet, health spending has not been institutionalized as a long-term priority for the government. Elaborate the statement in 250 words for 15 marker. Right, so this is the first article, and associated with this, here is a question. Please solve the MCQ and tell me what is the correct answer quickly. Please tell me what is the correct answer. Consider the following statements regarding the National Health Policy 2017. To ensure that the government expenditure is 2.5% of GDP, the expenditure of the center should account for 80% of the total public spending on health. One of the objectives is to promote community participation. There are 3 statements. You are supposed to find how many are correct. First one is correct. I've given you the data. First one is correct. Second one is incorrect. You should know this, 40%. I've told you this as well. Third one, yes. One of the objectives is to promote community participation. There are multiple objectives. For example, universal health care, community participation, development of infrastructure, healthcare related infrastructure, right, training and ensuring skilled personnel are available. So multiple objectives were kept under the National Health Policy 2017. Right option for the question is option B. All of you have answered. You have given right option correctly. Please pat yourself back for the good job done. Don't pat too hardly. You may experience a fracture. Let's go forward. Next article, devolution, not debt. Devolution, not debt. What is the point given in the article? What are the important points? Listen to me carefully. The central government in the budget will allocate certain funds for the states. Is the point 1 clear? Will allocate certain funds for the state. This is according to the recommendation given by the Finance Commission. The Finance Commission will provide recommendation regarding devolution. All of you heard of this? Will provide recommendation regarding devolution. So based on what is the devolution formula given by the Finance Commission, the central government, whenever the union budget is announced, certain amount of funds would be allocated to the states. But remember the next point as well. Does the Finance Commission always recommend only devolution transfer of the funds? In addition to the devolution, there is one more transfer, that is grants. Remember this as well. There is one more transfer, that is grants. Sunday, when you're looking at the pie chart where the government has given information regarding how much money will be spent in the next 1 year, observe how much of the money will be transferred because of devolution formula and how much of the money will be the grants transferred by the center to the state. Now, what has happened in the last couple of years? The expenditure of the states has increased. Simple. The expenditure of the states has increased. And that is not very hard to find. Because of the pandemic, overall expenditure increased. And when the overall expenditure increases, if the funds which are transferred from the center to the states are sufficient, I repeat, if the funds transferred by the center to the states is sufficient, the requirement to borrow will be lesser. Right? Requirement to borrow would be lesser. But what has happened in the recent times? On one side, the overall expenditure of the states has increased. This is not keeping in pace with the amount of devolution done by the states. Meaning, this particular increase in the expenditure is much greater compared to the devolution that the states are receiving. Of course, yes, devolution is based on the formula given by the Finance Commission. The Finance Commission, that is the 15th Finance Commission, recommended a devolution formula of 41%. It recommended a devolution of 41% and it has been implemented by the central government. But the problem is this. The Finance Commission simply says, take 41% of the divisible pool. Take 41% from the divisible pool and transfer to the states. But what is the divisible pool here? Divisible pool basically consists of the taxes which are collected by the center. The taxes, pan-India taxes which have been collected by the center. There is one trick that is generally used by the central government. Rather than increasing the tax rate, the central government will simply implement multiple types of cesses. Is the point clear to all of you? Rather than increasing the tax rate directly, rather than imposing, let's say, 14% tax rate, to increase it to 15%, what the center will do is add 1% cesses above and over 14%. And what is the use of this? Center will impose the cess, collect the cess and will utilize the cess. It is not under any obligation to transfer the cesses to the states. There is no mandate on the central government. It is not compulsory for the central government to transfer the cesses and surcharges to the state government. In fact, in the earlier article as well, it is mentioned. That is, Government of India earlier implemented a type of cess. That is essentially the healthcare and education cess. Healthcare and education cess. Implemented this cess, has collected huge amount of money under the healthcare and education cess. But it is not utilizing these particular cesses. All the amount that has been collected has not been utilized for the implementation and the development associated with the healthcare sector. So on one side, states' requirement of funding has increased. The center, is basically using these kind of tools to ensure the divisible pool of taxes doesn't increase by a large number, and it will implement 41% devolution formula. Now, as a result of all of this, what will happen? The states are forced to borrow more from the market. Simple. The states are forced to borrow more from the market. In some of the states, the examples have been provided, such as Tamil Nadu, such as Kerala, such as Punjab, etc., where the states have been forced to borrow huge amount of money. How much? In some of the states, it is more than 25% of the total income. Understand the obligation for the state. In some of the states, it is more than 25% of the income. In some states, it is more than 30% of the income. And how do states borrow? Essentially, the states issue mainly I'm talking, essentially the states issue the state development loans. Please do let me know. All of you know the idea of a state development loan? The bonds which are issued by the state government are called as a state development loan, SDL. So the states have been issuing more and more STL and borrowing. And what is the impact of this? And before I go forward, in no way I am saying that states are not implementing, let's say, wrong policies. I'm not saying that. There are multiple states which are following profligate policies. That is kind of expenditure which is not providing any kind of a benefit except reaping certain electoral benefits. Right? Yes, there are certain states which are implementing that. But the concern is overall picture. Overall picture. There are multiple states which are implementing, which are borrowing money by issuing STLs in the market. And basically this is increasing the debt of the states. It is increasing the interest burden on the states. And these particular states are using this money to provide for infrastructure as well as to provide for social welfare. So the argument of the editorial is simple. Devolution should provide protection to the states. Devolution should ensure sufficient resources available for the states. But in reality, what is happening? Devolution is not sufficient. As a result, it is the debt that is being used by the states for the implementation of their policies. Done? Everybody is okay with the discussion here? So based on the discussion, here is an MCQ. Please solve the MCQ and tell me what is the correct answer quickly. I want everybody to give the answer to the question. Consider the following regarding cess. Every cess collected by the union government has to be approved by the parliament. Article 270 of the Constitution allows the cess to be excluded from the purview of divisible pool of taxes. If cess collected in 1 year is unspent, then it can be used for other purposes. It can be used for other purposes. What is the correct answer? Some of you have given option A. Some of you have given option B. Let's start. Every cess collected by the union government has to be approved by the parliament. Yes, cess has to be approved by the parliament. Article 270 of the Constitution allows the cess to be excluded from the purview of divisible pool of taxes. Yes, that is true by the way. If cess collected in 1 year is unspent, then it can be used for other purposes. No. If it is unspent, it can be carried. It can be carried forward to the next year. But you cannot use it for other purposes. Right? Whatever is the purpose for which the cess has been implemented, it shall be used for the same purpose. So, two of the statements are true. Right option is option B here. Let's go forward. Next article. Will removing the curbs on the Chinese FDI help India? There is a debate or there is a discussion which has happened between two people and a moderator. That particular, let's say discussion has been provided in the article. You don't have to read the complete article. Listen to the most important points now. Point number 1. Back in the year 2020, there were Galwan clashes. All of you heard of Galwan clashes? There were Galwan clashes, that is frictions between, let's say the armed forces of India as well as China. And after Galwan clashes, the relations between China and India took a hit. Multiple policies were implemented by both the sides, which basically pushed back the relations that were held between both of the countries. Now, one such area of measure was basically Government of India imposing multiple restrictions on investments coming from neighboring countries. I repeat, investments coming from neighboring countries, not specifically targeting China, but of course, yes, it was mainly targeted towards China, but policy was made in such a way that any investment that will come into India from neighboring countries which will share the land border with India, now they will have to take the approval. They will have to take only one route, that is approval route, which hurt the foreign direct investments that would come from China into Indian market. This is point number 1. Point number 2, there is also one more important area, that is government projects. Listen to this carefully. Government projects. What is this idea for government projects? The government of India, just like any government around the world or many governments around the world, will spend money and implement projects. Now, when these kind of projects are implemented, they will basically ask for the private sector to participate, bid for the projects, and the projects will be allocated. Done. This is a basic idea. One more type of a policy that was implemented by the government after 2020 Galwan clash was that any Chinese company wants to participate in the government bids, government projects. Now they were supposed to first get registered. Now they will have to approach a particular committee set up by the government of India. They will have to take the security approvals first. Only and only then they will be allowed to participate in the government bids. Then everybody is able to understand. Only then they will be allowed to participate in the government project bids. In recent times, both of these particular policies, which were earlier implemented, are basically being reviewed. I'm not saying they have been reversed. I'm saying they are being reviewed. Very recently, the direct flights between India and China started again. Correct? The Kailas Manas Sarovar, that was allowed by China very recently. The visas, right? Certain regulations regarding visas for the Chinese nationals have been relaxed by the government of India. The heads of both of the countries have met multiple times in the last couple of years. The defense ministers have met. The external affairs minister visited China, etc. So there has been certain movement towards normalization of relations between both of the countries. Now the two policies which were implemented earlier are being reviewed. Right? So essentially now the argument is, should we withdraw these policies? If we withdraw, what can be the impact? Because mind you, once you're going to withdraw these kind of policies, there is no doubt Chinese companies will come into India. They will come with huge amount of investments, assuming these policies will be withdrawn. So the same concern which has been raised by the government earlier, same concerns will arise even now. That is, what if the Chinese companies will invest in certain sensitive sectors? For example, let's say certain projects which will be implemented nearby defense installations, certain projects within the telecom sector, certain projects, right, let's say within the financial sector, where the financial data, financial information which is very sensitive of all the Indians, right, can reach into the hands of the Chinese companies or Chinese authorities. What if they enter into electric vehicle manufacturing and they will basically bring such equipment that can be used for spying by the Chinese authorities? So I hope you understand there are certain security concerns. So now the question arises, what should be done by the government? Should the government open up all of the sectors to the Chinese investors? Or should the government basically have a policy wherein, right, each of the proposals which will be put forward by the Chinese companies will be vetted thoroughly? But if the second option is taken, again the Chinese authorities will raise the same issue. They will raise the same issue, and this has been raised multiple times by the Chinese authorities. Right? So I hope you understand. So these are some of the concerns. These are some of the important areas which have been discussed in the article here. In fact, there is one committee associated with this. Please remember the name of the committee, Rajiv Gauba Committee, a high-level committee. Rajiv Gauba Committee. Right? Recently, the Rajiv Gauba Committee submitted recommendations. In fact, that was the recommendations. Some of these recommendations were cited by Economic Survey as well. That is, for example, recommendations associated with quality control orders. Everybody is okay? Right? So these are certain important points associated with Chinese investments coming into India. Can I move on to the next article now? Those who are present, please do let me know. Are you able to follow the discussion that I've done so far in 3 articles? Okay, let's go forward. Supreme Court has stayed 2026 UGC Campus Equity Rules. In one of the sessions that I took earlier, I'd mentioned this particular Campus Equity Rules. I told you this, just quick revision. Back in the year 2012, a set of rules were announced by the University Grants Commission. What is the set of rules talking about? Essentially ensuring that all the people, or there is no, right, let's say, treatment of people based on the caste, discrimination based on the caste. That particular set of framework or rules, equity based rules, was introduced by UGC back in the 2012. Very recently, they updated the framework. In 2026, they announced one more set of a framework, that is the latest equity guidelines or equity rules. And I told you this earlier, the population or the kind of people who are being covered, who have been covered, right, who will be protected from the discrimination in the campuses, now the list has been expanded. The list has been expanded. For example, OBCs are covered now. Right? There shall not be any kind of a discrimination against the people belonging to SCs, STs, OBCs, women, the people with physical disabilities, etc. The list has been expanded. But the concern was not with the expansion of the list. The concern was the way discrimination as a concept has been defined under the rules. That is one. Right? How discrimination has been defined. For example, discrimination can be against a candidate belonging to general caste as well. All of you are able to understand. It can be against a person belonging to general caste as well. Why discrimination only against OBCs will be identified? Why only against SCs will be covered under this? So earlier, there was a provision which would penalize, which would basically have certain penalty provisions or penalty provisions if there are false cases filed. If there are false cases filed, that is, let's assume there is one candidate who has a grudge against another student. Simply this particular candidate belongs to the SC or ST category or OBC category. Now the person will go to the committee, file a complaint against the second person. Earlier, if this was done, a false complaint was filed, and if it was found to be false, there will be penalty. There will be certain punishment. Now that particular provision has been withdrawn. And that raised a lot of debate, that raised a lot of criticism against the UGC guidelines. I told you last week when I covered it, there is a petition which has been filed in the Supreme Court of India. Supreme Court of India yesterday took up the petition and has stayed the implementation of the 2026 guidelines. It is a simple update, right? The Supreme Court of India has simply stated the new guidelines require a closer look. The new guidelines merit a closer inspection. So till then, what we are going to do? The 2026 guidelines will not be implemented. Rather, whatever guidelines were there earlier announced in 2012, they will continue to be implemented. This is basically the update. In addition to this, the Supreme Court of India also has asked the Government of India to give a reply. Regarding what? Regarding specifically how the Section 3C of the new guidelines define discrimination. Is it okay? The caste-based discrimination which has been defined under Section 3, on what basis this particular discrimination has been defined? A clarification has been sought by the Supreme Court of India from the government as well as the UGC. Right? So this is a developing issue. After a couple of days, again this will be there because the Supreme Court will again hear the matter. Let's go forward. Next article, important one. UK Prime Minister, Mr. Starmer, has visited China. Right? Basically, he went for a multi-day visit to China. He met the president of China and certain talks have been held. And I'll tell you what has been the outcome of the talk. But this is important development. Important for a simple reason. Historically, if you see, countries such as France, right, or countries such as UK or Canada for that matter, these are very close allies of USA. Correct? These are very close allies of USA. USA has implemented multiple policies to provide certain relief to these countries, to provide protection to these countries, etc. That has been the policy of USA. But under the current administration, we have been discussing this repeatedly. Whatever policies have been implemented earlier by the earlier administrations, all of them have been taken away by the current administration and now the policy is exactly opposite. That is the current policy centered around the interest of USA, not the allies' interest, not the interest of the global market, not in the interest of the global peace. It is centered around USA, America first policy. Now, what it has led to is these particular countries, which are traditionally the allies of USA, now they are looking at other countries. They are looking into entering into trade agreements with other countries, entering into security agreements with other countries. They are looking to mend the relations with other countries. And this is where China is picking up its pace. China is negotiating. China is providing relaxations to other countries. China is simply stating, for example, in this meet, the Chinese president simply stated that China will always support the global rule-based order. The global rule-based order. What does he mean by that? For example, WTO. USA is against the WTO structure. China says, we want the continuation of the structure but with certain changes. United Nations, many other organizations, where USA is basically vacating, areas where USA is vacating, China is trying to take up that particular position. And the best example for this is France is negotiating with China now. Canada, earlier I told you this, Canada, the Prime Minister of Canada visited China and negotiations were held. Certain trade relaxations were provided on both the sides, which is expected to boost the trade between both of them. After that, the President of USA threatened to impose 100% tariff if there was a trade deal between both of them. And Canada simply stated, no, there is no trade deal. But the President of USA has not backed down. Yesterday, Mr. Donald Trump has announced a 50% tariff on aircrafts coming from China, aircrafts coming from Canada, by the way. Although there was a clarification provided, he has targeted the aircrafts. He is saying 50% tariff will be applicable on the Canadian aircrafts. So, as a result of this kind of let's say, the disintegration of the earlier relations, you will see more and more countries migrating towards other countries, middle powers, or China for that matter. And China, in terms of GDP, it is the second largest country. And why is UK Prime Minister visiting China then? Why is UK Prime Minister visiting China? If you see the trajectory of the relations between both of them, the last time the Prime Minister of UK visited China was back in the year 2018. It was back in the year 2018. Theresa May, right? Theresa May was the Prime Minister of UK 2016 to 2019. In 2018, she visited China. But after that, the relations between both of the countries deteriorated. They were hit because UK raised certain concerns regarding the policies of China, human rights violations of China, etc. Even there was allegation of spying as well, espionage as well. As a result of this, the relations were hurt. But please understand, China is important for United Kingdom. Reason being, it is the third largest trading partner. Third largest trading partner. And because the economic activity in UK is not progressing according to the expectations, there are economic problems in United Kingdom. Rather than trying to negotiate with USA, which is very difficult right now, UK is trying to mend its relations with China. Right, so that's the reason the Prime Minister, along with a huge delegation of the business leaders, lot of the business leaders have been taken to China. So multi-day visit has been planned. This is one of the, right, let's say, the meetings that was scheduled. What has been the outcome of the meeting? What has been the outcome of the meeting? China has promised to make certain relaxations in terms of visa regulations. Visa regulations for the tourist coming from UK, certain relaxation will be provided. And the tariff that China has imposed on the whiskey that is coming from UK, that tariff will be brought down. Right, so essentially these are the outcomes of the meet that has happened between the heads of two states here, United Kingdom as well as China. Can we go forward? Right, important development, by the way, important development. Next one, certain articles from Economic Survey now. Right, certain articles from Economic Survey. And before I start, right, let me ask you one question. Yesterday I've done a video covering the most important highlights of Economic Survey. If you're yet to watch it, please do watch it. But if you ask me, sir, for mains, is it sufficient? Highlights is sufficient? Absolutely no. So how many of you want me to do a complete video that is covering chapter by chapter, that is a chapter wise coverage of economic survey? Do let me know in the chat section now, and those who are watching the recorded video, do let me know in the comment section. Okay, let's go forward. Survey calls for relaxing FRBM targets for the center, but states financing worsening. What are the important points? There is a piece of legislation: fiscal responsibility and budget management. Fiscal responsibility and budget management. Under the FRBM law, the central government is supposed to bring down the fiscal deficit to 3% of GDP. 3% of GDP. Initially, the FRBM target was 2008 and 9. Later, it has been postponed. And Government of India had set 2020 as a target to achieve, right, FRBM numbers. Because of the pandemic, even that was not met. Now, the economic survey says there are a lot of experts who are demanding that the government should reinstate this particular FRBM target, basically make a pathway to achieve that. Make a pathway to achieve that. Because during the pandemic, the fiscal deficit increased. It increased. How much? It increased more than 9%, 9% of GDP. But the government of India, because of its policies, because of the fiscal prudent policies it has implemented, it has been able to drag down the fiscal deficit. According to the latest number, the fiscal deficit target of 4.4% is on the table. That is current financial year. We are on the path to achieve that. Whether we achieve that or not, don't worry. You will come to know when the budget announcement is done. But more importantly, the economic survey simply says the government is very prudent right now. Prudent in the sense the finances are very much sustainable for the government of India. But when you look at the global market, when you look at what is happening around the world, there is a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of volatility. And when this kind of a situation is existing, we should provide flexibility for the finances for the government rather than fixing a target and trying to achieve that. Is everybody able to understand the logic here? Yes. Should we meet 3% target? Yes, no doubt. It will inspire confidence of the investors. It will inspire confidence of the credit rating agencies. We should meet that. But look at the situation right now. Situation is uncertain. Volatility is very high. So now there should be more flexibility provided for the central government rather than running behind this particular fiscal deficit target. This is point number one. Point number two, what about the states? What about the states? The economic survey is concerned about the financial position of the states. Why so? There is a term called as revenue deficit. Correct? All of you heard of this? In the context of the central government, there will be, right, generally a revenue deficit. And whenever there's a revenue deficit, it essentially indicates that the government is borrowing money in the market not for creation of asset purposes, but for consumption purpose. Because the revenue is associated with consumption. Capital side of the budget is associated with asset creation. So there is a revenue deficit in the context of the central government. What about the states? What about the states? This is where it gets interesting. Please make a note of this. Multiple states in India have revenue surplus. Multiple states in India have revenue surplus. How much? Back in the year 2018 and 2019, there were 19 states which had revenue surplus. 19 states which had revenue surplus, mind you. And by 24 and 25, the survey simply states this has fallen down to 11 states. The states which enjoy a revenue surplus has come down from 19 to 11, which means there is a rising tendency of the state governments to incur more and more expenditure under the revenue head. And this is a cause of concern because the state spending under the capital, center spending under capital, that is for asset creation. And the market mantra always is, if you want to borrow from the market, borrow for asset creation, not for consumption purposes. So the economic survey has flagged this particular issue and has stated that the states should take care of the finances. And for the central government, the argument is fiscal deficit target flexibility should be provided. Now, quickly solve this particular question and tell me what is the key answer. Consider the following statements. Monetized deficit adds to inflationary pressures. The FRBM Act 2003 bars the Reserve Bank of India from primary subscription of the G securities. And the third one, the RBI is allowed indirect monetization. How many of the three statements are correct? Tell me the correct answer very quickly. Simran says option C. Others? What is the correct answer? Only one person has replied so far. Curious learner says option B. Okay, let me solve the question. Monetized deficit adds to inflationary pressure. What do you mean by monetized deficit? The government directly borrowing from RBI. The government directly borrowing from Reserve Bank of India. Right? That is not allowed, by the way. It was earlier allowed to bridge the deficit. Government used to directly borrow from RBI. That is not allowed. Why? It will contribute to inflation. Because RBI giving money to the government essentially means creation of new money. Okay. The FRBM Act 2003 bars the Reserve Bank of India from the primary subscription of the G securities. Yes. FRBM Act of 2003 simply says direct monetization is not allowed, which means you cannot directly purchase the government securities from the primary market. That is, when the government is issuing the bonds, you cannot directly purchase from the government. But please remember, can RBI participate in the secondary market of the government bonds? Yes. That is, can RBI purchase a government bond from a bank? Yes. From an insurance company? Yes. But not directly from the government. Okay. The RBI is allowed indirect monetization, that is essentially secondary market participation. Yes, the third one is correct. All the three are correct. Right option for the question is option C, all the three. A lot of you have chosen option B, by the way. What is the confusion? Do let me know. I'll address it at the end of the session. If there is a confusion regarding the question, do let me know right now. I'm asking this because a lot of you have chosen option B. Let's go forward. Survey backs decision of the union government to scrap MGNREGA. The survey, economic survey published yesterday, has supported the government of India's argument that there is a need to replace MGNREGA. What are the arguments put forward in the economic survey? Point number one, the situation in the rural market is much improved compared to what it was a decade ago or 2 decades ago. The situation in the rural market. What do you mean by situation here? In case of rural economy, if you calculate what is the demand for the goods and services, if you calculate essentially the access to formal credit, look at the inflation in the rural market, etc. When you look at these kind of parameters, the situation in the rural market has improved by huge number, which essentially means rural market population living there doesn't require the same kind of assistance that was provided 2 decades ago. Because MGNREGA was implemented 2 decades ago. So the population residing in the rural India doesn't require that kind of assistance. And as a result of this kind of improved lifestyle, improved situation in the rural market, lot of people, rather than demanding MGNREGA wages, I repeat, rather than demanding MGNREGA wages, have started opting for other kind of work. Have started opting for other kind of work. And to prove that, it simply tells you, look at the data. The survey says, look at the data. The number of work days back in the year 2021, that is financial year 2021, the number of work days back in the financial year 2021 was almost 390 crore work days. That was the demand for work days, 390 crore. And by the year 2025, by the 2025 and 26, in this year, if you look at the demand for the number of work days under MGNREGA, it has fallen down to around 184 crore work days. And I hope you understand demand, because MGNREGA was a demand driven scheme. You demanded the job using a job card, you demanded, and the work was allocated to you. So look at the demand for the number of working days. It has actually fallen down by very, very large number. Sharp decrease is there. Reason is situation is much better in rural India. And second, people have shifted to other forms of work opportunities. That is a reason. And in addition to this, the survey simply says Manrega faced a lot of structural issues. Manrega faced lot of structural issues. For example, in lot of the cases, the funds were allocated for the implementation of the project. The funds were misutilized. Right? Funds were not utilized in the right way. Lot of a misutilization or let's say the displacement of the funds given to somebody else, middlemen, etc. That was the issue. Second issue, lot of projects, they were there on the paper but were not implemented on the ground. They were not implemented on the ground. And there were a lot of issues in terms of getting the attendance registered. And without registering the attendance, people were given the wages. So misappropriation of the funds, implementation of the projects, etc. A lot of structural issues were there, for Manrega. And that's the reason the government of India has done the right decision or taken the right decision to replace Manrega with one more initiative, that is a VBG-RAM-G. That is essentially the opinion that has been provided in the economic survey. Done? Everybody is okay? Next, exports momentum. What does the economic survey say about exports? The economic survey simply cites the things that we all know. What are the things that we know? In the last 1.5 years, the international trade has been disrupted. Same thing has been given in survey. Why the international trade has been disrupted? The trade has been weaponized. The trade has been weaponized. Weaponized by whom? By developed countries such as USA. The supply chains have been disrupted. The supply chain disruption has taken place. Trade has been weaponized. And this basically will have an impact on India's trade with the global market. So what is the solution then? You know the problem. What is the solution then? Economic survey recommends diversification. Have a look at this. 1. Diversify. Diversify the exports. And when you talk about diversification of the exports, there are two important sub-points that you need to remember. Diversification in terms of the market, that is to which countries you are exporting, and diversification in terms of the goods that you are exporting. Please remember this. Diversification would generally mean, diversify your export basket, diversify your markets as well. And that is true in the context of India by signing the multiple trade agreements. We have signed multiple trade agreements in the last couple of years. For example, we have signed a trade agreement with the European Union very recently, not signed, finalized. We have signed trade agreement with New Zealand. We have signed trade agreement earlier with United Arab Emirates. So we have signed multiple trade agreements. We have expanded multiple trade agreements. And this will help diversification of exports. But in terms of the kind of goods that we are exporting, there is a concern in India. That is, we need to focus on 1, high value goods. Please remember this. High value goods. And we need to focus on the quality of goods. This was in fact mentioned by the Prime Minister very recently also. That is, the products that we are exporting should be quality products. If you have quality products, doesn't matter the kind of disruption that will happen in the global market, there will be demand for your products in the global market. But what do I mean by high value products? Look at the products such as semiconductors. Look at nuclear reactors. Look at artificial intelligence, etc. These are high value products. India is not very well known for exporting these high value products. We export the mid value as well as the lower value products to the global market. So rather than focusing only on these, focus on high value products as well. Done? So these are some of the recommendations that has been provided by economic survey in order to ensure that despite the uncertainty, despite the volatility that is happening, weaponization of the trade that is taking place, India will be able to continue to grow and maintain the momentum of its exports. Next one, next article, digital addiction. There is a very nice area that has been covered by economic survey this year. Last year they spoke about, right, let's say the food consumption patterns in India, right, the food habits in India. Even this year also they have covered it, by the way. That is the kind of unhealthy foods. But in addition to that coverage, there is also another important social issue which has been covered: digital addiction. Digital addiction. Right now, we are seeing that in India, be it adults, be it youngsters, or be it even children, by the way, everybody is addicted to their smartphones. Addicted to the smartphones. We are simply doom scrolling one after the other, the page after page, video after video, whether it is interesting, uninteresting, related, not related, doesn't matter. But it is a problem. It is a problem, by the way. Reason is, one, it will have an impact on, right, let's say the thinking of the children. It will have impact on the eyesight of the children. It will ensure that you are not involved in the activity or the productive work that is required for you. It will have impact on your educational achievements as well. And because you're sitting most of the times, you're consuming junk food, watching, right, let's say one video after other, one page after the other. This will also add to the health complications that Indians will face in the future. So what is the economic survey simply saying? Economic survey says we need to ensure all the stakeholders are involved in the process. All the stakeholders, parents, schools, the government, all of them should be involved. And what we should do is essentially provide, one, ensure that there is a counseling infrastructure in India. Counseling. And when I say counseling, I know a lot of you will basically attach, right, a stigma towards counseling. And that is true. In India, counseling is always attached with a stigma, that is social stigma. Counseling means a lot of people will assume you have gone mad in India. Right? So argument is there is a stigma attached to counseling. First, we need to address that and ensure that there is a proper skilled workforce of counselors. Not just at the higher level, but even at the school level. We need to provide certain literacy to the parents as well. Because a lot of times you must have seen, the parents are the reason why the children have become digitally addicted. The child starts to cry, they will basically hand over a mobile. The child starts to, right, shout in the home, start throwing tantrums, they will hand over the mobile, switch on the YouTube and ask the child to watch it. All of these are the reasons, by the way. Right? So what we need to do, one, ensure counseling infrastructure plus, right, there are skilled counselors available at all the levels. We need to provide this kind of a, right, let's say education even to the parents. But at the same point of time, there is also need to have a relook at the policy. What kind of policy I'm talking about? In multiple countries right now, there is a ban on social media. For certain children below the age of certain number, there is a ban on the usage of social media. And the ban is not just enforced by the government, even the companies are supposed to enforce it. That is, they are held liable if they are found, right, violating or not implementing the ban correctly. So why not consider that kind of a policy in India? Consider the policy, right? Why not introduce a new system wherein the apps will be developed only for, right, certain children, right, that is below the age of 15 years who are basically using it for educational purposes, etc. So these are some of the recommendations that have been provided. In addition to this, the schools will also play a very important role, mind you. How? If the students are basically interested in, let's say, physical activities, sports, right, or let's say debate, curricular and co-curricular activities like this, physical activities, etc., the participation of the students will increase there, interest of the students will increase there, rather than spending all the time using these digital tools, right, they will be interested more, right, in all these other activities. So the schools will also play a very important role. So this is what has been recommended by the economic survey. Next, one more article, right, basically in addition to this, one more article. Financial sector regulators must walk the tight rope. Right, what is this? I'll just give you one data set. Couple of days ago, SEBI published a survey. Very interesting survey, by the way. SEBI published a survey. According to that survey, there are more than 33 crore households in India. More than 33. But out of these 33 plus crore households, hardly around 3 crore households are interested, are having knowledge about securities in India. Security instruments. That is shares, bonds, right, InvITs, ETFs, etc. Hardly 3 crore plus households, which essentially means despite implementing so many reforms in India, despite stock market booming so much, despite RBI implementing reforms to attract retail investors, the participation of households in India in the capital market, or let's say in the financial market, is very limited. Right? In addition to that, now look at what is economic survey saying. The economic survey simply says the financial regulators have a very difficult job to perform. One, they want foreign investors to come into India, invest more and more money. That is needed, by the way. And right now the concern is the FPIs, foreign portfolio investors, rather than investing in India, they are withdrawing from India. Not because there is something fundamentally wrong in Indian market. Not because of that. They are more worried about uncertainty and volatility. So we want foreign investors to invest in India. But at the same point of time, the investors would want lot of freedom in terms of regulations. Right? They want a lot of freedom in terms of regulations. That is, they do not like these kind of regulations implemented by the regulators. They want relaxation. They want withdrawal of the regulations. So what should be done by the regulator now? That is what economic survey says. What should be done by the regulator? Rather than having a uniform set of regulations, regulators, for example, SEBI, should try out another set of regulation, that is differentiated supervision. Differentiated supervision, meaning what? You don't have to implement the guidelines universally and uniformly. Find out certain markets where strict guidelines are required, implement strict guidelines. For example, where the possibility of manipulation is very high, where the possibility of cheating is very high, where the possibility of, right, let's say, the investors losing money is very high, manipulation is very high. For example, F&O market, futures and options market. According to SEBI itself, more than 90% of the investors in the F&O market lose money. They end up losing money. Why? This is a very complicated market. Lot of investors, especially retail investors, do not understand how F&O market works. They are influenced by reels, influenced by individuals, influenced by financial influencers. They end up investing, do not understanding the complications or the risk that is associated with investment. Done? Everybody is okay? So can we try out a differentiated supervision? Differentiated supervision, where the market is already mature, relax the regulation. Where the probability of manipulation is very high, have very strict regulation. This will essentially ensure that you are balancing both. That is, you are trying to promote investor participation. At the same time, you are also trying to protect the interest of the investors. Right? So this is a recommendation regarding financial sector. Now the last article for today. Mitigation versus adaptation. Cutting carbon emissions should not be the top priority. Read the statement. A lot of you will be enraged. Don't. I'll tell you the meaning of it. Don't jump to the conclusion only looking at the headline of the article. Look at the article or look at the headline. Very interesting, right? Cutting the carbon emissions should not be the top priority. What is the meaning of this? The economic survey, and not just this one, even earlier economic surveys, they have supported, right, sustainable growth, sustainable development, sustainable growth. In fact, multiple economic surveys have also stated that other countries should try to emulate what government of India is trying to do. And India should try to emulate important policies, important reforms that have been implemented in other countries, which has promoted sustainable development in those particular countries. This has been the viewpoint. But this economic survey basically raises one more issue. That is, when you look at the developed countries, they have achieved high growth. They have achieved higher GDP. Now they will start asking India to cut down emission. That is mitigation. Correct? Everybody is able to understand that is mitigation. And anybody who is a newcomer who is confused between mitigation and adaptation, what's the difference? Mitigation essentially means cutting the emissions. What measure you will implement to cut down the emission? For example, rather than using petrol, I will shift to, right, let's say electric car. That is a mitigation. Adaptation essentially means there is a pollution, there is emission, there is impact on the climate. How do I adapt to this? How do I adapt to this? For example, let's say temperature is higher. Can I create a certain kind of crop varieties which are, right, let's say temperature resilient? All of you able to understand? Resilient to the change in the climate. So there is mitigation, there is adaptation. But the economic survey says developed countries generally pressurize a developing country such as India to focus more on mitigation. Spend more on mitigation. And a developing country such as India has limited resources, by the way. It doesn't have resources on the lines of USA. Similar to, let's say, other countries. No, we have very limited resources. And there is a requirement of welfare expenditure. India needs to spend a lot of money on welfare. In the beginning only, I told you, government of India is being criticized because it is not spending sufficient amount of money on healthcare. Now imagine, can government of India divert the funds rather than spending on social welfare? Can they spend money on mitigation? Yes, you will be able to achieve reduction in emission, but at the same point of time, what about the growth? What about the development? That will be hurt. That is the reason the economic survey uses a very nice statement. Very nice statement. In fact, if I was somebody who was setting the paper, I'm not, by the way, if I was somebody who was setting the paper, I'll simply take this statement, put it in the descriptive question part. What is the statement? Mitigation ought to be subservient to adaptation. Right? I'll zoom it. Please have a look at the statement. Mitigation, I'll underline it as well. Mitigation ought to be subservient to adaptation. Do not focus only on mitigation. That will hurt even the adaptation strategies. That will hurt, right, welfare expenditure of the governments, etc. So focus on, right, mitigation as well. Focus on adaptation as well. But the kind of climate change that has taken place. This is one more statement given in economic survey. The kind of climate change that has taken place, it is not a kind of change that will have, right, let's say, that will lead to a civilizational collapse. This kind of a change will not lead to civilizational collapse. I just hope and pray Mr. Donald Trump will not read economic survey. Right? Because the argument of Mr. Donald Trump is the same. In fact, he goes to the other end and says, there is no climate change. Impact is not there, etc. So the kind of impact we are going to have, yes, there will be an impact. But this impact will not lead to something that will lead to a change in the civilization. So there is a need to focus on adaptation measures, implement certain technologies which can essentially reduce the impact of climate change. Done? Everybody is okay? So this is the viewpoint, or this is basically what has been discussed in the context of climate change in the economic survey. Right, so these are the various articles, the concepts as well as the questions I wanted to discuss with you people, which have appeared in the Delhi edition of Hindu newspaper dated 30th January 2026. Now before I wind up and start taking up your question, this Sunday budget will be announced. If you are writing the prelims examination, we are going to have a live session on the budget on Sunday itself. Please do join that. Please do join that. The stream will be set up, the timing will be conveyed to you. Please don't worry, it will be live, it will be on Sunday. Please do join that particular budget session. Now, if you have liked the discussion, hit the like button. If you are yet to join our YouTube channel, kindly do it right now. Any doubts, confusion, do let me know. Done then. Thanks a lot. Take care. Right, see you next time. Have a great day.